Great. All right. It looks like I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for having me today and for being here. The topic today is what I like to call the modern STEMinist. And so STEMinist is kind of like the female word or the female term for women that are in STEM. And then I always like to do the modern twist because we are, in a new day and age of, women really coming out of their shell norm, being those VPs, being those CEOs. We're not just in STEM anymore. We're leaders in STEM, we're ambassadors in STEM, and we're really growing and changing the field. And so that's kind of the point of the title. I'll go a little bit more into about me. My name is, again, Cassie Roby. My background is from Florida State University, where I got my bachelor's and my master's in mechanical engineering. While I was at Florida State University, I was featured twirler, and so I was in the marching band on top of being an engineering student. And so I was in the band all 5 years. I was at Florida State for 5 years, getting both of those degrees. I was also a part of Kappa Kappa Gamma and the sorority. I was a part of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers as the public relations chair. And I was also a SWE member. And so all of those things were my extracurricular activities. After I graduated, I went straight into my career. I moved across the country in June of 2020. So right in the middle of the pandemic, I said, hey, let's move across the country. It's a great idea. So I started at Northrop Grumman in Redondo Beach. As a spacecraft thermal engineer, which is kind of like a systems engineering position, but I also get to do some of the detailed work and the design work of, a design engineer. And then most recently, I've gotten an opportunity to work for NASA as a flight operations engineer. This has been on the new James Webb Space Telescope that recently launched back in December 25th of 2021. And then now in my free time, I do some volunteer work. And so this includes the Girl Scouts of Orange County STEM Patrol. I am also a Real Talk Ambassador, which is a program that is partnered with the Miss America organization and educates students about the dangers of substance abuse. And then finally, within Northrop Grumman, I am the NG Wing Communications Chair for the South Bay branch, which is the Women's International Network. So I put together newsletters, kind of similar to like a public relations chair. And then on top of that, I am Miss Los Angeles County for 2022. And so part of that, I do outreach like this. I've created my own nonprofit called Space Girls. And so I try to encourage more women to get into STEM. And then for the women that are already in STEM, I try to educate them and prepare them about some of the things that they may encounter on their road to being a STEM professional. And so a little roadmap for what we're going to cover today. First, I'm going to talk about women in STEM, just very briefly, some of the history and the statistics. And then we're going to go into stereotypes. What are the stereotypes that you may see in school, you might see in your career, and how to handle them. Going into mansplaining and man corruption, as well as imposter syndrome, what that is, how to combat it. Sexual harassment, and then very quickly some scholarship opportunities that are aligned with the Miss America organization. So women in STEM. So women make up half the population, but only 27% of the STEM workforce. And so like many of you guys, I'm sure you want to see that number be a lot more equal, but we have come a long way. And that's my main message of this whole slide is in 1970, we made up only 38% of all US workers and only 8% of STEM. And so even since the 70s, which is, about 50 years ago, we have come a long way. We've been up to almost 20%, but we still have more work to do. And I don't want to see it take another 50 years for us to be at, 47%. And so, part of that is educating and encouraging more young girls to get into STEM. So, research shows that 74% of teen girls are interested in STEM. So what happens? How does that number drastically reduce? So what I've seen happens is there's lack of exposure, there's lack of confidence, and then there's lack of support and mentors. And so you guys are currently in college, you are, majoring in STEM, specifically engineering. And so lack of exposure isn't really your problem. Your problem might be lack of confidence and then lack of support and mentors. And so that's what I'm here to do. That's what my goal is to not only uplift you and give you confidence and be real with you guys that there are stereotypes, there are mansplaining, there is sexual harassment, but give you the confidence to be able to handle them, and then also be there to support you and be a mentor for you if you need it. So going into stereotypes, some of the stereotypes that women in STEM face, this is just kind of what I've seen and what I've done research on. So I categorized them into 4 different categories. One is too pretty, the prove again, overly dramatic, and misfit. So going into too pretty, something I was actually told when I was in college and I got a really good internship in Northrop Grumman was that I only got the job because I'm pretty. So for some reason they correlated, my outward appearance with my intellect, and, apparently those cannot be the same. I was also told in college, this is cute. Are you going to go finish putting on your makeup now? So that was actually put online, but I was told something similar by one of my classmates when we were trying to schedule a group meeting, trying to figure out what time would work. And it was early in the morning. And I guess they thought I wouldn't be able to make it because I was going to be busy putting on makeup. I've heard people be told you're too pretty to be a scientist, and then that women in STEM are unfeminine. And so, these are real stereotypes that women in STEM face, that you kind of have to look a certain way or be a certain way, and you can't be yourself or even be considered pretty. So my, response, how I tell you to respond, is to be yourself. I think that is, the best way to be comfortable in your skin as well as comfortable in your abilities. And I'll remind you that people don't define you, how you express yourself, and people don't define your intellect or your beauty. That both of those things, I think, come from inside of you, and they're not even outwardly reflective. The second thing is to dress appropriately in what makes you confident. And so this is more in a professional sense. In college, I feel like I just wore, maybe like workout clothes, something. It was a lot more relaxed. But when you do get into the workplace, or you're at an internship, you're doing research in a lab, make sure you're dressed appropriately so people can take you seriously, right? Not wearing open-toed shoes. If you're supposed to have your hair pulled not out, back, make sure that you have the, appropriate hair ties, the appropriate clips that are, going to make sure that, yes, you can, have pretty hair and you can, have nice shoes, but you're also prepared to do the job and you're ready to do the job. At work currently right now in Northrop Grumman, a lot of times I'll wear a skirt or a dress and I'll wear heels, and it's fine for most of the times that I'm behind my desk. But there are days that I might need to go on the floor. I might need to go look at the hardware. I might need to go into the machine shop. And so I always have a pair of jeans, a t-shirt, and tennis shoes at my desk ready to go. And so, if that opportunity does present itself, I can't be put in an awkward situation where I'm unable to go, or it might be unsafe for me to go. And then finally, correct the comment. Make sure that you remind them that you worked hard to be an engineering student. You've worked hard to get where you are, and you still should be able to reflect your personal style and be confident in that personal style. And then hope to encourage more women to join STEM and break that stereotype. So if you kind of, educate people along the way, it will really help the future generations of women in STEM. The second is prove again. And so these first two facts or statistics, that 2/3 of women report having to prove themselves over and over again in engineering, and 3/4 of Black women report having to prove themselves multiple times. So it's even worse for, minority women in STEM. And then these last 3 quotes were something that I actually got from, I did the same talk for the SWE Los Angeles chapter. And so that was more of a discussion because a lot of those women have been in the industry for years. And so one of them said that, they were an engineer, and somebody asked them, how do you support the engineers here? Somebody else actually asked me when I was at Northrop Grumman, and they saw me at the gym and they saw me in the hall at work, and they're like, oh, what part of business do you support? They automatically assumed that I wasn't an engineer. And then one of the engineer girls said that she was in a meeting and she was trying to, explain something. And a man condescendingly looked over and said, "Do I need to get an engineer for you?" And her response was pretty awesome. She said, "What other engineer other than this engineer are you going to get?" So I loved that. But, also, again, women having to prove themselves over and over again is a very real issue. And so how to respond, I would say speak up. It's really important that you stand up for yourself and your good work. And, you remind others of the work that you've already done, the work that you've already accomplished in school. If you're facing this, remind your group mates of, the skills that you have gained, a test score, a project that you've done, any research or internship opportunities or experiences that you may have that you can tie and prove them. Say that actually I was able to complete a similar task last time, so I can do this, or I do know what I'm talking about. Or you say something, if you haven't specifically done that specific thing before, you could always say, I haven't done this before, but I am confident in my abilities and I would like to give it a try. Just making sure that you're speaking up and you're advocating and betting on yourself. And then having confidence in your ability. Mistakes do make you human. They do happen and they help you learn. There's a reason that, engineering is kind of a group activity. And it's because it is hard, it is complex, it does require a lot of critical thinking. And, brainstorming with each other is really important, and making mistakes with each other and helping each other out is important. And then imposter syndrome, which we'll get to a little bit later. The next is overly dramatic, the next stereotype. And so some quotes I got is, "We're considered to be difficult when we get angry, whereas men are perceived to be tough and powerful." Another one is, "When women express stereotypical female emotions, they are judged as lacking emotional control." And then this is one from another coworker I knew, and she was defending herself and her analysis in a meeting, and she kind of had to raise her voice because they weren't listening to her. And so when she walked out, one of the men made the comment "Oh wow," she was like "Meow" in that meeting, mocking like a cat hissing or something. And so just disrespect, putting that characteristic on us that we're overly dramatic or even difficult to work with just because we're a woman. So how to respond? I am always big on passionate and being passionate. And so I say that it's okay to show emotions in the workplace. They show that you care. And, if you're not caring, then you don't really either like what you do, or you're just over it and you're not really mentally and emotionally there. And, that's not a good place to be either. And so emotions show you care as long as you make sure that they're appropriate, and they're appropriate for, a group meeting, or they're appropriate for a business meeting, making sure kind of like what you wear. And some of the things you do is watch your language, make sure that you're not apologizing, watch that upspeak. And we'll talk about both of this a little bit later, because, that discredits what you're saying and shows self-doubt. And so if you're showing self-doubt, but you're trying to push for something, it can be really hard for people to, take you seriously or to follow what you are trying to say. And then the last stereotype I want to talk about is the misfit stereotype. And so some quotes that I found was, "I feel that personally engaging with my colleagues may negatively affect perceptions about my competence. Just don't invite her, she won't feel comfortable. I do not discuss personal things with people." And then subtle behaviors of sexism include not being listened to in meetings. And we just kind of talked about that, not being listened to in meetings, kind of being forced to speak up and things like that. And then you get called overly dramatic. So how to respond? I would say find your tribe. Going back to that first one where the, young lady didn't feel comfortable sharing, some of her personal things that are going on in her personal life. And that's what makes us human. We all have different things going on behind closed doors. When we leave, the College of Engineering, when we leave school, we all have different things that are going on at home, and nobody really knows anybody's full story. And so making sure that you find your tribe of women or friends, men and women, family, whoever it may be that you can confide in, that you can have those conversations with, to just kind of give yourself a mental break, a mental relax, to help vent, to help, unload some of that off of your mind and your heart is really important. And, I think SWE groups like this are really important because you're not only to find your tribe with women, but you're also, finding your tribe within women engineers or women in STEM specifically. And so that really helps you because they're going to be able to relate to you even more. And then again, don't take it personally because it's not you, it really is our society. This is the culture that society has built on. I mean, we look back at that statistic that women were only 8% of STEM in 1970. And so, there's a lot of men in the workplace who don't understand how to work with women. They've never had to work with women before, especially if you are an engineer and you're looking to, work on a shop floor, or you're looking to work with blue collar workers. And, these are men who have since high school probably worked in a similar role, and they don't know how to deal with a younger female engineer coming and talking to them. And then again, people don't know how to have uncomfortable conversations. I do think that our society is getting better with this, and we're seeing a lot of social justice movements, but people still don't know how to have uncomfortable conversations, especially about things that they don't know or understand. And so again, it's not you, it really is, our society. And then going back to finding your tribe, schools, universities, and companies have groups that you can join. And so for you guys in college, you have SWE, ASME, IEEE for electrical engineers. And then again, I was in KKG, which is Kappa Kappa Gamma, and then there's also the band. So it doesn't even have to be specific to engineering. You can find, your best friends, my best friends, who are still my best friends. One majored in fashion and the other majored in English. And so pretty much as far away from engineering or STEM that you could get. But, they were my tribe. They always had my back. And then in your career, there is, these are all groups within NASA and Northrop Grumman. So you have, the Pride group, the Green, you have the Hispanics group, SWE, as well as NGWIN. So all of these groups, again, help you find your tribe once you move out of college. So moving on to mansplaining and man-corruption. So what is mansplaining? Mansplaining is when a man condescendingly lectures a woman on a topic under the mistaken assumption that she has no knowledge on that topic. And so it was on Jeopardy, actually. And then I have this map of a mansplainer, which, they have a smirk, a condescending tone, and are hyper confident. And then what is man-corruption? Man-corruption is the unnecessary interruption of a woman by a man. And this is basically linked to a man's sense of entitlement. We kind of talk about it nowadays as like toxic masculinity, because it makes it very natural for them to speak over others and to hold the floor longer than, is proper, or to make sure that they're kind of like taking away that time or that spotlight from you. And again, that, is partly on the man, but also, on our culture and on our society. So some examples that we have. So this one with Katie and Gary is on Twitter. And so Katie says, honestly, climate change scares the heck out of me. It makes me so sad to see what we're losing because of it. And then Gary tells her to go learn some actual science and stop, listening to the scam. And she responds that she already has a PhD in astrophysics. And so it would be an overkill at this point to go learn even more science. And so again, a random man on Twitter telling a girl that has a PhD in astrophysics to go learn some real science. So again, just assuming that they know so much more than the woman about a particular topic. And then we have Casey and Thomas. And Casey said there's so many solutions to the lack of women in technology that they don't get at the actual problems. I'm going to link to an article, and Thomas responds to tell her to read the full article. And then Casey says that she wrote the article. And so, again, Thomas mansplaining the article that Casey wrote. He didn't even take the time to necessarily listen or read who wrote the author of the article. So what is really going on? And we go back to our society and our culture and what they have a heritage of, which is discrediting women's knowledge and experience, because we look back at the 70s and before the 70s, the 40s and the 50s, and women were just considered to be homemakers. And it seems like that was a really long time ago, but in retrospect, it really isn't. And women not used to not have access to higher education. And so we're still slowly building on that. We're still slowly, allowing women to be seen as real professionals. And then giving more importance to men's perspective. This is the best example I have of this is if you're working in a group and you pitch an idea and then it kind of gets ignored, right? You kind of, get ignored, it's glossed over, nobody really, thinks much of it. And then a couple minutes later, a male colleague will pitch the same exact idea, and all of a sudden it's the best idea that anybody's ever heard, and that's what you go with. And so just giving more importance, validity, and just listening to, I guess, more so in the men's perspective than a female, simply because she's a female and she's not seen as having as much knowledge and experience. And then silencing women's voices. So speaking over them in meetings, that's that man corruption. And then even assigning them to sit on the outside of the table and take notes. Now, one thing that is, this is kind of like a catch-22 on this, sit on the outside of the table and take notes, because I will say I am a young engineer in the workplace, and there are a lot of meetings that I go to where I do sit on the outside of the table because, I'm not directly involved in that conversation, but there are meetings that I walk into where I know that, that's my component, that's my part that I'm doing the thermal analysis on. And, I do need to be involved in this conversation. And those are the ones that I do, sit in at the meeting. And then sometimes some of those meetings that, you're invited to, you're just kind of like an onlooker, taking notes isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's, if you need to be involved in the conversation, you need to be at the table, but take those learning opportunities as well when you have them, to sit on the outside and actually be present in the meeting and take notes and learn and absorb as much as you can, especially early in your career. And so going on about this, so all of these byproducts, all of this history and all this dynamic has, resulted in mansplaining and man corruption. So how to respond, I broke it up into 4 different categories. So one is to check yourself, consider the context, assert your authority, and then finally spread the word. So going on into checking yourself. So the first is staying calm, which is, the worst thing they always say. Don't ever say that to a girl. Don't ever tell her to stay calm. But it's true, because it is required, especially when you're working in a school setting, or you're working on a group project, or you're especially in a professional business setting. You have to stay calm. You have to make sure that you're checking yourself. And then I always say to breathe, take a moment to pause, take a deep breath, kind of remind yourself to stay calm before, flying off the handle or raising your voice or getting upset, because then that feeds into that, overly dramatic stereotype that we spoke about earlier. And then lean on your allies. And so I always say check for supporters, both male and female. And so look around, see who's around you. That kind of goes back into your tribe. If your tribe is within engineering, you can kind of look at your friend and be like, did they really just do that? Is this really happening? And they might, speak up for you. They may validate how you're feeling. That kind of gives you that extra motivation, that extra confidence boost to speak up to yourself. And then make sure you're staying composed in the moment. Address the issue in a professional manner. Make sure that, you are holding the standard high for them. Women are held to a higher standard just because of all the stereotypes we have to face. And so anytime you kind of break and fall into one of those stereotypes, men use it to judge, an entire gender. And so make sure that, we are held to a higher standard, and it's unfortunate, but you make sure that you stay composed and hold yourself to that higher standard as well. So consider the context. And so one, consider the context of yourself and of the environment. And so first is your posture. How are you sitting? What is your arm placement? Are you, sitting back in your chair, hunched over? Are your arms crossed? Do you look very closed off and uninvolved? Or are you confident? Are you sitting up? Are your shoulders down and back? Are your arms open? Do you have a notebook? Are you ready to take notes? Are you ready to take on an action item, or ready to go send that email to the professor or go to the professor's office hours? What is your posture? What is your involvement in that conversation that could cause men to look over you or, want to interrupt you because they don't believe that what you're saying is valuable? Next is your position. So again, where are you in the room? Are you the lead, on this team, or are they talking about your component? Are they talking about the part of the project that you said you would do and you are, off to the side, not engaged in the conversation? And then even because we are in this virtual space, where are you on Zoom? Are you the, the person that's been active in the chat? Are you the person that's, been able to ask questions? Or are you the person that is, having your camera off the whole time? You haven't been engaged. You're not involved in the active conversation. And then your tone of voice. And so no upspeak. And so upspeak is the upward tone at the end of a sentence. And so, for example, you would say, like instead of saying, are we going there? You would say, are we going there? And so that upspeak, that upward tone that women more naturally do leads to, a look of lack of self-confidence, self-doubt, and that doesn't help when somebody is mansplaining or interrupting you. And then speak with confidence. That kind of leads into that. Upspeak, make sure you're leading with confidence so you're not insecure or unsure. So when you're saying something, say it with confidence, or make it even if it is a question, make it a confident question. Don't be like, oh, this is a stupid question. Know that it's a good question. And then watch your language. So I have a problem of saying sorry a lot, even when something's not, my fault at all. And so making sure you're watching your language. And then I also have a problem of asking like, oh, did that make sense? Instead, maybe change it up and say, I trust that you're following me. I trust that you understand what I'm saying and my point of view, instead of asking, does that make sense? And then assert your authority. And so remind him of your position, remind him, as a thermal design engineer, I am aware, or, as a junior in software engineering who got an A in that course, or, as a teacher's assistant of XYZ class. And, just remind him of your position and your authority. And then also remind him of where you were. Be like, yes, I also attended that meeting and I'm aware of that. And, making sure that you remind him that you are qualified and that you were there, you are actively involved and engaged. Don't thank him. When you thank a man for man-interrupting or mansplaining, it kind of reinforces to him that he helped you, and that feeds into that hyper confidence or hyper ego that we talked about. When you thank somebody, that kind of gives them the pat on the back that they helped you understand something that you didn't understand, but in reality, you already understood it. And then this encourages the behavior and can actually end up creating a pattern towards yourself as well as towards other women in the fields. And then fight man-interruption. Don't do so in an aggressive manner, but kind of do so as in, as I was saying, or kind of, make sure that your point of view is heard and make sure that they know that you were speaking. And so I always go with that. As I was saying, it was really important to make sure they understand what they're doing. You can even pull them to the side after the meeting and say, hi, next time, I would really appreciate it if you'd let me finish my thought before you interrupted me, and things like that. And so I've actually been in a few meetings with some coworkers, and it was actually two guys. So it wasn't technically an interruption, but one person did keep interrupting the other, and the other person was just finally like, are you going to let me finish my thought? And so you don't necessarily want it to get to that point, but you do want to make sure that, your opinion and your voice is heard. So finally, spreading the word through educating and explaining. And so, oops, I didn't edit that. So educating and explaining is really important because a lot of the times men are our allies. I'm not going to say that every single man in STEM is out to get women, doesn't like women in the workplace. There are the very few, but I would say the majority of men, are supportive towards women, understand the need of having a diverse workforce. And so making sure that you educate them when they do something like that, because they may not know. And so giving them the opportunity to educate them, like, hey, when you did that, it, was like mansplaining, like, that I have, a degree in engineering, I have XYZ experience, and, affirming that and educating them. And then if they may not know, making sure you're telling them, be like, hey, I actually did a research project on cryogenics. So, I do know more about that, making sure you're educating them about your educational background and then a little bit about mansplaining and explaining what that is. What is mansplaining? What is man corruption? Because the fact is that 47, 48 mixed gender conversations actually consisted of men interrupting women. And so, it is a very common thing, especially when talking about different types of conversations. How not to respond. So this is like a little bonus. And so one, don't internalize it, because again, you are not the issue. We talked about the culture that we have here. We have talked about the culture in STEM, the very little women in STEM, and remind yourself that you're needed at the table. I always say that if there's nobody like you sitting at the table, then you're needed to be at the table. And so you can bring your diverse background, your culture, your history, your experiences all to that table. And that's going to create for a better brainstorming, a more innovative environment, and a better, overall outcome for whatever the project may be. And then don't second guess yourself, because you are smart and you are good at what you do. Your ideas are creative and they are valid. Engineering is hard. And so even, if you're going through a hard class right now, or you're struggling on something, you've made it as far as you have for a reason. And everybody struggles with STEM. STEM is not easy, or, everybody would do it. And so just remind yourself that you are smart, you are good at what you do, and, reach out to help, reach out for your resources, and depend on your teammates, because again, engineering really is a team activity. So again, a quick summary about this topic. Mansplaining is part of a wired issue. It's not just you. Your ideas are valid. You have tools, and make sure you stand up for yourself and for each other. So if you see this issue, you see a guy, mansplaining to a girl, make sure that you stand up to them and for them. So we're going to go into imposter syndrome. And so imposter syndrome is an internal experience of believing that you are not as competent as others perceive you to be. And this is actually a widespread issue. This is not just an issue in STEM. And 70% of people actually feel insecure, unworthy of their accomplishments. And again, I think that goes back to the culture that we have here in the United States, only having 40 hours of vacation a year, and making sure that, especially for women, as soon as you have a baby, you come back as soon as you possibly can. And I don't feel like until recently we've ever really had a focus on mental health, especially I know when I was growing up, mental health, like going to therapy, was kind of looked down upon. And so I think that's really led to a large imposter syndrome, feeling insecure, feeling unworthy. And so I'm, glad to say that now that, stereotype is kind of changing, and we are seeing better mental health standards in the United States, but it has led to a major issue. And, it is a major issue specifically for women in STEM. And so what to do, some of the tips that I've found helpful are to remember your credentials. And so some of the things that you can do is make a list of what you have achieved and what you have accomplished, no matter how small. That kind of say, like, when you make a to-do list, even at the small things, just so you kind of get that satisfaction, that relief of checking off, like, I started the laundry, or, I, folded the laundry, even small tasks like that, or I, decluttered the table or something like that. I checked the mail. And so when you talk about things you've achieved, it can be as simple as getting an A on a homework, a quiz, or a test, or as complex as building a prototype. It can be as complicated as, learning a completely new software, or simply as I showed up to class. Right? Even, I showed up to class on time today or something like that. I went to the professor's office hours and, got help on that homework problem. And so it can be as small or as big as, you need to make yourself, be relaxed, get that mental check. And then if you have a problem, remembering your credentials or thinking about what you have achieved, ask those who know you well, like your family or your close friends, because there's nobody who, stands by you and is alongside you on this journey, like your tribe that we talked about, making sure you have your tribe earlier. And so asking them, what have I really overcome? What have I really done? And am I worthy of this? And I guarantee you that they're going to come up with a whole list of things that you didn't even think about. And then reward yourself. So making achievable goals and rewarding yourself when you hit them. So again, there are big goals like building an entire prototype, and then there are small goals that lead up to you building that prototype. And that includes, going to the lab, going to class, learning how to use that software, going to buy filament for the 3D printer. And so making sure that you have achievable big goals and little goals. And so, you are constantly rewarding yourself, giving yourself that mental break, and reminding yourself that you are worthy and are making progress. And then also sleep on it. There's a lot of times when if you feel overwhelmed, it's, a lot easier. Just give yourself rest. Sometimes that's what we need. In school, it's always really hectic, and you might be pulling an all-nighter to make sure that you're finishing that prototype, or you're studying for a test all night long, and making sure that you are actually getting adequate sleep and you're, making time for your physical health is also very important, because that will be directly related to your mental health. Making sure that you are eating healthy, you're sleeping, and just giving yourself time to let those accomplishments sink in is really important. So, great. Okay, I have a couple more minutes. We're going to talk about sexual harassment, and then I believe it's scholarships, and then we're going to open it up for questions. So sexual harassment is a form of discrimination, and that is defined by the California Fair Employment and Housing Law. And I talk about sexual harassment because I was sexually harassed. I graduated with my master's in May-ish 2020, started my career in July of 2020, and by the end of that year, so between July and December, I had been sexually harassed. So it is a real thing that happens. And one thing that I realized is that I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to document it. I didn't know where to go. And so today I want to make sure that I'm giving you the tools. And so, hopefully this doesn't happen to you, but if it does, you can look back and be like, oh yeah, I remember learning about what do I do in this situation. And so the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing prohibits sexual harassment in the workplace and defines it as unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, or other verbal or physical conduct of sexual nature from any person directed towards or in the presence of an employee or applicant when the condition of employment used for basic for employment decisions, and it interferes with the individual's work performance or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive working environment. There are two types of sexual harassment. There's quid pro quo, and this is when the harasser is in a position of authority over their victim. And so this would be like your TA, your professor, your boss, something like that. The other would be hostile environment. And so this is like your peers. This is when the harasser exhibits hostile misconduct that unreasonably interferes with the individual work performance and creates an intimidating or offensive work environment. And so I would consider my type of sexual harassment hostile environment because it did come from a peer, someone that was of the same level of me. So what to do? This was the biggest thing that I really didn't know when I was being sexually harassed. So, a lot of the times it's a lot easier said than done to instruct the harasser to stop. A a lot of times I really like couldn't believe that he had said that or that this was really happening. And so I did, push back in some situations, but a lot of the times you're kind of just in shock. At least I was. So it's really important that you document it. And so even if you don't explicitly instruct the harasser to stop, it's important to make sure that, once that moment of, oh my gosh, this is happening passes, that you document who said it, what they said and did, the date, time, and place where it happened, and as well as anyone else who was there and might have witnessed the incident. And so an example of how you properly document this is on November 20th, 2020 at approximately 10:30 a.m., John Smith said, "You don't know how to take care of your body. You need a man," to Cassie Roby in her office building A1, office 1234B. This was witnessed by Cassie's office mate, Jordan White. And so, having a witness, if there is one, where it was located, the date, time, who said it, and what they said. And what you'll find is, is this a one-time incident or is it multiple? Are you, every other week going to, your little notepad and documenting this incident? And then what this does is it allows you to go to HR with confidence and with clarity. One of my best friends went into HR, and she said that a lot of times what happens is people get frazzled when they end up going to HR. They like have it all lined up in their head, but then when they go to say it, it's jumbled, it's confusing, they don't understand. And then it's hard for HR to put the pieces together and do their job. And so if you're going to HR and you've already documented it, you documented it immediately after it was said, so there's no questions in your mind that this is what was said, that's the time it was, then it makes it a lot easier for them to address the issue and ultimately fix the issue. And then, if they don't stop, definitely report it to a teacher, manager, supervisor, human resources, the dean, a mentor, anybody that you may know. There's a zero retaliation policy. Make sure you report it to your school or HR. And then there's also the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing and the Federal Equality Employment Opportunity Commission that you can report to within 300 days of the incident. The California Department is, I think, 365 days within the incident to report. So there are resources. I would start, at your school or at the research facility or company, wherever it's happening. And then if they don't do anything, then just know that you have statewide and federal resources. So what not to do, don't respond negatively, especially because this can always come back to bite you and you might look, like you were at fault when that's absolutely not true. So don't show aggression, don't be passive aggressive, and don't be petty, because, it will belittle your feelings and belittle your statements. And then again, don't spread rumors or gossip. Just let HR do their job, because you don't want people to question your character or your authority. You want people to be able to trust you. And it's really not something that the whole team or the whole department or the whole class needs to know about. So finally, I'm going to talk about some scholarships. And so, like I said earlier, I am the reigning Miss Los Angeles County, and that's a part of the Miss America organization. And so in June, I will go compete for the title of Miss California. Whoever wins Miss California will then go on to compete for Miss America. It is the largest scholarship provider for women in the United States. And so the Miss organization, there's the Miss and the Teen division. So the Miss division is 19 to 26 years old. The areas of competition include a 10-minute private interview with the judges. And so this helps develop your speaking skills, your interview skills. So that's something that you'll take with you the rest of your life. There's also a talent portion. For me, my talent is baton twirling, because like I said, I was in the band, but your talent can really be anything. Miss America a few years ago did a science experiment. There have been singers and dancers and, pianists, flutists, any musical instrument you can think of. There's Some girl wrote a poem, one girl wrote a rap and then rapped it, and even like signing for sign language. And so all different types of talent. If you don't think you have a talent, I guarantee that's not true. There is evening gown, which is now called red carpet. And so anything you'd wear on a red carpet Hollywood event. On stage question. And then for the Miss, there is a 1 minute social impact statement. So again, my social impact is called Space Girls, to encourage more women to get into STEM. To date, I've won over 4,000, that's not updated, dollars of scholarship money. And the current Miss America has won over $100,000 in scholarship money. Local competitions near you are Miss Los Angeles County, Culver City, Miss University Heights, Miss San Bernardino County, and then Miss San Fernando Valley are all local competitions near you. And again, if you're interested, I can give you more information, as well as, help you. A lot of people think that pageants cost a lot. But again, this is more of a scholarship competition. And so, I guarantee you can find something in your closet that will work, as well as, even go to Goodwill. One of the girls who got first runner-up at Miss California last year, everything she wears on stage, from her talent to her evening gown to her interview, is all secondhand. And so she didn't purchase any of that. And so all that scholarship money goes directly towards her schooling. So that's all that I have for you guys today. Again, thank you guys for having me. If you want to reach out to me, you can scan my QR code, or I can put my email in the chat. If you want me to mentor you, you can sign up on my website. I actually mentor some of the SWE members at Cal State Long Beach. And so I actually encourage one to join their SWE board. And so she's really building her resume, and another I'm helping. She's considering moving from aerospace engineering to mechanical engineering. And so any questions, it can be, formal, informal, it can be, 5 minutes, or it can be as long as you want. And so feel free to do that. And then with that, I will open it up for questions for the last few minutes we have here. Let me go back. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then you can either speak up, or you can